Is Gran Turismo the greatest video game movie ever made? Maybe, but no, definitely not. But kind of. Let's get into it. What's up, my dude? Your friendly neighborhood Tony here, and I just went and watched the latest video game adjacent movie, Gran Turismo, and I want to let you know whether or not I think this is something that you should spend your time and money seeing in theaters. If that kind of thing sounds cool to you and you want to keep up to speed on all the new big movies coming out in theaters, make sure you subscribe. So as I do with all my reviews, I'm going to go over a little bit of information about the movie so you know what it's about and who's making it. Then I'll go into my pros and cons, and then finally I'll let you know who I think this movie is for, if anyone. For those that are totally oblivious to the words Gran followed by Turismo, Gran Turismo is a PlayStation video game that's been around since the, I think, mid to late 90s. And although it is a video game, it is probably more accurately known as a racing simulator. The people that make Gran Turismo really pride themselves on making very realistic cars in their games that drive a lot like the cars do in real life. And in this movie, we follow a young man named Jan Martinborough, who is super addicted to Gran Turismo the game, so much so that he enters into a competition being run by, I believe, Nissan and Polyphony, which is the company that makes Gran Turismo, as well as PlayStation, in order to find out if he himself can become a real-life race car driver. So that's why I say, is this the greatest video game movie? No, it can't really be, because it's not based on a video game. It's based on a real person who used video games to kind of excel in sports. So in reality, it's kind of a sports biopic. The movie is directed by Neill Blomkamp, who you probably know from directing District 9, which I think was a great movie. He also directed Chappie and Elysium, which neither of which really worked for me. So he's been a little hit and miss here and there. But when I found out that he was going to be directing the Gran Turismo movie, I was definitely blown away and surprised, although it does kind of make sense when you think about his relationship with technology. This movie also has a pretty amazing cast. You have Orlando Bloom playing kind of a marketing guru that comes up with the concept of what's known as GT Academy. There's David Harbour, who is playing a mechanic, or I guess an engineer, who himself was previously a race car driver. He is kind of the father figure, you know, Mickey from Rocky kind of character in this movie. You have a young actor named Archie. I believe his last name is Madekwe or something like that. I'm not entirely sure. He's playing the lead character, Jan. You have Djimon Honsou playing his father, who is, of course, a legendary actor. And oddly enough, I didn't know this until I looked it up after the fact. The person playing the main character's mother in the movie is none other than Ginger Spice of the Spice Girls. I'm not kidding. But we'll get into my thoughts on the different actors and actresses and how they did when we get into our pros and cons. Just so you know where I'm coming from when it comes to Gran Turismo, I have played a few of the games throughout my life, although I'm definitely not a diehard GT fan at all. I do remember, I think the first one I played was Gran Turismo 2, which was on the original PlayStation way back in the day. And I just remember at the time being kind of blown away with how many different types of real cars they had in the game. And as a kid at the time, just racing all these different cars and, you know, just pretending which ones I would own as I got older. Of course, I've never really owned any kind of a race car at all, so that didn't really pan out. But either way, it was a lot of fun at the time. So I kind of went into this movie a little open. I wasn't a diehard GT fan. I didn't know a ton about racing simulators, although I have played video games my entire life, so I know about that culture. And I also know absolutely nothing about professional race car driving. But despite all of my lack of knowledge and awareness when it comes to this world, did this movie do enough to capture my attention and to make me enjoy it? Well, let's get into the pros first. I always like to start off with the different performances. For me, the real standout of the movie was David Harbour. I mean, to be fair, he's never not good. And although he does have some cheesy dialogue throughout the movie, I think he really elevates it to another level. He really sells his character of being this kind of rough taskmaster, but one that you also kind of feel for when you find out a little bit more about his past. David Harbour really is better than he has any right being in this role. Another big standout for me was Djimon Honsou. Again, he plays the main character's dad, and he is phenomenal just in general. I mean, he's always been a really good actor. I think probably the first time I saw him might have been in, oh gosh, I can't remember the name of the movie. It's the one where there is a ship filled with enslaved Africans, and he plays one of them. Amistad. That's what it is. The first time I think I saw him was in Amistad, where he was amazing, even though he was pretty new at acting at the time. Then I've seen him in just a ton of movies ever since then, and he's always fantastic. He does a really good job in this movie. You know, he plays kind of the typical father figure in any of these kind of like sports biopics where, you know, he wants what's best for his son, and what he believes is best is to not follow this kind of pipe dream of becoming a race car driver. But he does a wonderful job as that character. I do wish we had a little bit more time with his character in the movie, but I'll get into that when we get into our cons. Ginger Spice, who plays the mom, was also surprisingly good. I didn't know that that's who that was at first until I looked it up after the fact. And although she definitely didn't become famous from being an actress, she does a really good job, so I'd be curious to see her in more things. The young actor Archie, who plays the main character Jan, is also pretty good in the movie, although you do get the feeling that he's being outacted by some of the people around him. For me, he was fine. He has a couple of moments where he gets to kind of show off his emotional ability, which he was pretty good in, but aside from that, didn't really do a lot throughout the movie to kind of blow me away, especially considering who he was standing next to. So acting aside, when it comes to the directing and the way this movie is shot, you can really tell that Neill Blomkamp is totally in his element here. Of course, we know he loves making all these super high-tech, gadget-filled movies, and he really gets to dive into that with this one. The way he shoots the different racing scenes and all the tech that's involved in the races as well as in the video game itself, and the way that they blend video game elements with real-life racing is honestly unlike anything I've ever seen. I don't want to spoil any of the specifics when it comes to that because it's really cool when you see it on screen, but if you've played any racing games at all, I think you're going to get a real kick out of what they do in this one. So keep an eye out for some of those nods. Aside from that, the racing sequences were just so expertly shot. There are several moments throughout the movie during races where I literally gasped so loudly that I embarrassed myself in the theater that I was in. And I am not the kind of person who overreacts in movies. There were just actually scenes that I did not see coming at all. And I was very shocked at what they were able to do. And then even more shocked to realize that a lot of those scenes were ripped right out of real life. As far as the racing is concerned, Neill Blomkamp also throws in some FPV drone shots. If you're not familiar with FPV drones, I believe they're like these first-person drone flying devices that you can shoot movies on. I don't know anything about them, but I do know that some of the scenes that they shot with those devices, getting these drones to fly through these small areas and follow these race cars around, was so impressive to me that I thought it was CG, but I found out after the fact that nope, those were straight up drone shots that they were using. So all in all, the racing scenes, without a doubt, blew me away. I thought they were phenomenally well done. And as far as the story structure is concerned, you know, it's a sports biopic, so you kind of already know the process and where it's going to go. But even with that, I feel like the emotional moments hit really hard. You know, racing in and of itself is a very dangerous sport, and they do not let up on that. They show you some things that could go very wrong. And knowing that this is all based on real events, it becomes especially heavy emotionally to know that these things did happen to real people. And again, not going to spoil anything, but just know that going into it. Another thing I want to touch on real quick before we get into the cons is the music and the sound effects. They do a number of things with music in this movie, some of which are pretty funny and some of which are just, you know, cool. Some great needle drops throughout the whole movie and also some great sound effects. Now, again, I don't know much about cars, so I'm not the guy to tell you, well, actually that engine sound effect is from a Porsche, not a Nissan. I don't know. I have no idea, but I do know what sounds good to me when I'm sitting in a movie theater. And I think all the sound effects that they used during the races especially were so incredibly well done, really impactful, and really kind of drove home the intensity and ferocity of some of these cars. Then they also do a thing where they blend in, just like they blend in certain things visually from the video game, they blend in different sound effects, some like PlayStation sound effects that you might be familiar with, maybe some menu sound effects from Gran Turismo. So if you're a nerd like me and you've played PlayStation for a long time, you're definitely going to get a kick out of some of that. So yeah, if you can't tell, I had a lot of fun with this movie, but there are a couple cons that I want to get to. For one, we kind of touched on it. Some of the dialogue can be pretty cheesy at times, and some of the story points can be pretty predictable. And I know that because it's based on a true story, you can only do so much. I mean, you can't completely change history when it comes to telling this story, although I'm sure they took a number of liberties. But if I'm being honest, yes, I did feel that at different times, some of the dialogue didn't work for me, and some of the different plot twists I saw coming a mile away. Also, I felt like not necessarily that the pacing was an issue, but rather how they chose to spend the time in the movie. There is an entire subplot, a romantic subplot, that I felt like could have been completely cut out of the film. It really didn't serve a purpose, and I almost felt like, now again, I don't know the true story, so I don't know if that was really a thing that happened, but to me, it almost felt like just a board of directors being like, oh, we got to throw in a romance subplot in this movie to make it, you know, hit all the different quadrants. And so I think they could have gotten rid of that. I would have loved if instead they spent more time with the main character's family. We see a little bit about his dad and his relationship with him. And also there's a few scenes with his mother, but we don't really, in my opinion, get enough of that. And then also he has a brother that they touch on a little bit, that his brother is kind of following in his father's footsteps. So you have that whole kind of uncertainty about like, oh, is this the favorite child? But you know, we just didn't get as much from that as I would have liked to. I think, again, we could have eliminated the romantic subplot entirely and focused a lot more on the family. I think that would have been more impactful for me personally. Aside from that, though, I got to keep it real. This is an awesome movie. I had so much fun watching this in theaters. Now, again, I know I am kind of the target audience for this, right? Even though I'm not specifically a massive GT fan, I am and have been a gamer my entire life. And I think action movies and car movies are pretty dope. You know, the original Fast and the Furious is one of my favorite movies of all time. So yes, I am definitely the target demographic for this flick. But that aside, putting on my critic hat, I think it was just very well done. I think it's a really good movie. Although I wouldn't say it's a video game movie, it is video game adjacent. And if this is the quality of film that we can come to expect when it comes to translating video games into film, I think we have a real positive future ahead of us. So who do I think this movie is for? Well, first off, if you're a gamer, if you are at all connected to Gran Turismo, or if you're into racing at all, then this is without a doubt a must-see. And if you're not necessarily into any of those categories, but you do like just a good old-fashioned sports movie going over the ups and downs of trying to be the best at something, if you can get behind that kind of emotional development in your characters, or if you just want to see some cool race scenes and some wild CG, and maybe even some things get blowed up real good, then I would definitely recommend checking out Gran Turismo. It's in theaters right now, and for me, I think it's something I'm gonna pick up when it comes out on Blu-ray. Of course, though, these are just my thoughts, my opinions. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Have you played much Gran Turismo growing up? Have you seen this movie just yet? And if so, what'd you think about it? And if you didn't like it as much as I did, let me know why. I'd love to hear it if you disagree with me on that. Whatever you think, let me know in the comments below. And of course, if you want to keep up to speed on all the new big movies coming out in theaters, make sure you subscribe. All right, I'll catch you in the next one. Be good.